you know yesterday was National Aviation Day? We know. We know this because of what the Boise Airport posted on their social media page to celebrate that day. Two brothers from Boise, they wrote, Robert and Norman Norse were so inspired by Wright brothers Orville and Wilbur, they built their own glider, they said. The post above the picture says Robert piloted from the top of Camel's Back Park in 1913, marking Boise's first flight. And granted, the caption does say circa 1913, so we'll give them that, except 1913 wasn't right. That wasn't it. Boise does have a very extensive aviation history, as we documented a few times here on the 208, going back to Varney Airlines' first flight in 1926, which would later become United Airlines, from what is now the Boise State campus. But Boise's first flight, the first flying machine to take off and land in Boise, was a couple years earlier. It wasn't just 1913 by a handful of Boise High students. It was 2 years earlier. For many, seeing that first aeroplane came in the early days of barnstorming, novelty acts.
Yeah, exactly.
Pilots who would land their light flying machines in a field, usually beside a barn.
And then they were associated with the fair generally.
Or, as in the case of Boise's first flight, the fairgrounds. It was Aviation Week, April 19th and 20th, 1911, featuring a 5-mile match race between a Buick and a biplane, flown by Walter Brookins.
He was a pilot. He was, I guess, in a sense, the pilot. He was the first pilot that the Wright brothers trained.
So Brookins was a big deal, and he drew a big crowd.
Because, well, obviously, airplanes were a brand new thing. Hardly anybody had ever seen one.
But there was a strong wind that Wednesday the 19th, which would not make flying a fragile contraption easy.
They were going to cancel it, and I think he came out and said, now let's do it anyway.
As the Statesman reporter put it, Brookins flew.
And as a good barnstormer will do, he put on a show. Well, he took off, not a problem, started flying around the fairgrounds. And at one point, he looked at the crowd apparently, and he revved that engine and started diving towards them. And people were scattering all over, and he just zoomed on up.
An old barnstorming trick, sure to give the crowd its money's worth. Brookins circled the fairgrounds 5 times for about 12 minutes, long enough to give the 200 or so people watching sore necks. Okay, so that was in April.
Yeah.
And it appears jumping off this hill was just about a month later with some high school kids.
Someone was inspired, weren't they?
Yeah. That someone was a group of Boise boys, teenagers who built their own flying machines from an American boy book. And on the afternoon of May 8th, Lawrence Stone and Harry McDougal and brothers Robert and Norman Norse glided off the top of Camel's Back Hill.
This is the equivalent of a hang glider in a lot of ways, jumping off this hill, but to be the first to do it, that's pretty gutsy.
Norman wound up floating about 40 feet before ending up in a heap in the park, making him the first Boise pilot to fly in Boise. It's crazy. They built it out of a book, which is amazing. The fairgrounds in those days, by the way, were actually right here where the KTVB studios stand today. The Statesman article from April 19th, 1911 ended with the line, quote, some 200 people witnessed this, the first aeroplane flight ever made in the Gem State, end quote, end quote. Except that wasn't true either. They must have forgotten about reporting on the near death of pilot James Ward of Chicago, who was making Idaho's first flights in October of 1910 in Lewiston. Several of them in a Curtiss biplane in front of a cheering crowd filling the grandstand of the Lewiston-Clarkston Fairgrounds. That is until his final flight. Apparently, Ward was about 200 feet in the air when his engine went out, but just before his plane hit the ground, Ward was able to jump out and miraculously only suffered minor injuries.